You're tuned into Agriculture Today, and we've yet another interesting topic associated with spring row crop planting in Kansas, and a research project that's been going on here at Kansas State University, looking at some new options in what are called seed lubricants to be used in our planters to assure efficient flow of that seed from the planter into the soil. Along with us once more is Ajay Sharda. He's a precision agricultural engineer with K-State Research and Extension. And we will identify this alternative product in just a moment. But there are commercial, what we call seed lubricants out there on the market, are there not, Ajay?
Yes, Eric. We have a very typical talc graphite option, which has been in the market and people use it most commonly. We have another product called Bare Fluency Agent, which recently came maybe a couple of years ago. And then the one you just mentioned, we have another new product, which is soy protein-based lubricant. The whole idea is when you're out planting, whether you're using centrofill option or using seed boxes, you would like those seeds to flow uniformly. That's what we kind of talk about, flowability of the seed within the metering system and within those tubes as well, to some extent more in the metering system itself, so that our metering unit performs in an optimal manner. The singulation is up to the mark, because if seed is not flowing to some extent, then it is not the fault of the metering system itself. It's not being able to pick the seed in the right manner. So that's one of the biggest goals with just looking at how costly the seed is and seed treatments are, and then the time and effort in terms of equipment we take in to put that seed into the soil.
Well, your project was comparing the soy protein-based treatment with these more standard treatments that have been around for a while. Before we speak of that option, what do we know about the older products, if you will, the talc?
Well, like you said, the talc is one of the common things which is available, but there has in just recent times lots of concerns. First, let's be clear, talc is not a problem in itself. It's a great product, but just the shape of the particles and all that. So the idea, you talk about seed flowability, we just want that seed to roll over each other and just keep flowing nice and clean. And when those seeds roll over each other, the shape of that particle, of that lubricant, can either accelerate or decelerate the process of abrasion of the compounds on top of the seed. So what has been seen, or people have kind of observed across the world actually, is that a lot of those compounds are getting abrased and along with the talc, and they get out from the exhaust system of our planting units, and they are out in the air.
As opposed to staying intact with the seed.
As opposed to staying intact with the seed. And there will be some compound which will be abrased, but if we can minimize that abrasion, we can minimize the movement of that compound from our seed boxes out in the environment. Now, the problem is when these compounds get out, these are toxic insecticides, and they have huge impact, especially on our ecosystem, water and soil, and especially on plants. And then we have seen huge impact on bees and pollination in those areas. It's not talc, it's just about people are very conscious about what can we do to minimize the movement of those compounds out in our environment.
And that other fluency product you spoke of, does it have the same issue as far as seed abrasiveness?
It does, and to be honest, we have some studies out there, but people are trying to do to the extent of those compounds which can be carried from our seed boxes out to the environment. But that fluency agent is more like polyethylene compound. It still has some issues in terms of getting out, and it can block the gills of the fishes, and something in terms of what it does onto our water bodies. So that has another component to it. And then we'll talk something about how those particle shapes look like later in the talk.
Let's get into the research then, as you wanted to compare the soy protein product to these other two, and once more seeing if that seed treatment's integrity was compromised at all, right?
Right. So to make sure that we can compare different aspects of what might happen, so what we did, we picked up small, medium, and large seeds of corn and for beans. So for each of the small, medium, and large seeds for both corn and soybean, we picked 2 different seed treatments as well. There are a ton of options out there. We just wanted to pick up any typical 2 of those. Then we also we made some different treatments. So we have some seeds which have no treatment at all. We have seeds which have treatment of talc graphite option with bare fluency agent, and then our soy protein-based lubricant. We consistently maintained one speed, which is our 5 miles per hour in terms of planting. We picked up 36,000 seeds per acre for corn and 150,000 seeds per acre for beans. And then we went out and we did replicated studies in terms of singulating that seed through our metering system. And the goal was we were watching what is the level of singulating the seed by the seed meter when we are using these different options.
So right to it, as far as the performance of the product, vis-a-vis the talc, vis-a-vis the fluency agent, how did it do?
We were pretty amazed in terms of results, both from the corn and beans, that all these products are pretty comparable in terms of singulating. There was no statistical difference between any of those treatments. So, what we just want to look at is that can soy protein-based lubricant provide a similar level of seed flowability and singulation? And we can now say, yes, it can.
Does it then have an advantage in reducing that abrasive impact that we see from these other treatments?
Potentially, yes. I'm saying that because we haven't done any structured study in terms of knowing the level of those compounds leaving our systems. The reason I'm saying potentially yes, because we send all these individual compounds to a chemistry lab where they did microscopic analysis of the particle shape and the size of all these seed lubricants we are talking about, the talc, the bare fluency agent, and the soy-based protein. Now, both fluency agent and the talc, they are more like lots of edges and irregular shapes. So, there is more possibility of abrasion. Right. Versus the soybean-based proteins, those particles are kind of a perfectly round or more round. They are smaller round, bigger round, but, those round particles will better allow the movement of the seed roll easily without causing abrasion of that material.
The lubricity is much better then.
Much better, yeah. So we expect that it will definitely reduce that. Another thing which is of interest, like we talk about what the talc and some of the fluency agent, since this is a soy protein-based product, so when it gets into the soil as well, it naturally attracts moisture and disintegrates into amino acids. So since this project was funded, I should say that, funded by United Soybean Board, they're definitely interested in knowing 2 things. One, how much amount of those compounds are getting out versus the other seed lubricants. And also, is there any impact, howsoever small, in terms of early seed emergence? Like we're talking about very, very small quantities, but yeah, so they definitely are interested.
There is one more matter at hand here, and that is the economics of using these seed lubricants. And has anything been identified along that line?
They still haven't come out with the final number in terms of what is going to cost, but their initial numbers say that an 8-pound jug for a soy-based protein is going to cost roughly $28. Now, if you're talking about a similar amount of product, which is talc graphite, that costs $20. So there's definitely an $8 cost differential. But in terms of soy-based protein lubricant, the recommendation is to add 0.1% of seed weight in terms of the amount of lubricant. Now, for talc and graphite, it is 0.33%. Based on the seed weight. So we're talking quite a bit of differential in terms of the amount of lubricant which will be used for the same amount of seed.
So a lower dosage may make that soy protein product more comparable.
Right. Absolutely. And as we are talking, the ag economic scientist at K-State, Dr. Terry Griffin, is working on putting some hard numbers on the paper so people can compare and make a decision.
And we'll look forward to those as part of the continuing information that you'll be generating here at K-State, you and Terry and colleagues, in identifying where these soy protein seed lubricant products fit for the producer. We appreciate the update, AJ.
Thank you so much.
And talking with us what they have evaluated so far on the performance of these what are called soy protein seed lubricant products for improving the flow of seed through the row crop planter, corn and soybeans featured in this particular research. Ajay Sharda is a precision agricultural engineer with K-State Research and Extension, reporting on this K-State project here on Agriculture Today.
Agriculture and food systems are the main drivers of the Kansas economy, but must be improved in order to feed the world's growing population. How are we going to do so? Reduce food loss, find ways to preserve grasslands, and help families stretch their dollars. Global food systems is one of the 5 grand challenges K-State Research and Extension is addressing. To learn more, visit www.ksre.ksu.edu.
We're back now on Agriculture Today and on another perspective on farm and ranch management for you right here. Gregg Ibendahl has joined us once more. He is an agricultural economist with K-State Research and Extension. Gregg has just put together a fresh new analysis on diesel fuel prices for 2018. Now, this is helpful, of course, because we're entering the full-scale field work season in Kansas with spring planting. Wheat harvest is coming up a little later on, so forth. And he's come up with some information that could be helpful in the diesel price outlook for the remainder of this year. More on that in just a second. But diesel prices are very much tied to the oil market, and that's where it really all starts, Gregg, right?
Yeah, certainly there's a high correlation between the oil price and the diesel price, as you might imagine here. So whenever we see the oil price go up, you can expect a corresponding increase in the price of diesel and gas. I mean, it's almost like clockwork for that.
And that said, so far in 2018, what has been the general drift of diesel prices?
Well, really gas prices, too. I mean, certainly no surprise if you fill up at the pump or get fuel delivered on your farm, you probably notice you're paying quite a bit more than you were this time last year. Basically, it's about 50 cents higher than what it was last year about this time, and it's almost $1 higher than what it was 2 years ago here. So certainly it's a much higher fuel situation going into 2018 than it was the last couple of years.
But you note in your write-up that diesel tends to stay in a general range of price, does it not?
Yeah, thankfully, before fracking came on in play, we saw quite a bit of wild variation. That was when we had $4 gas and all those good things like that. But really, since about 2014, I think that's when fracking kind of took hold here in the U.S. economy, and we get a lot more of our gas domestically, oil domestically, than we did before, which has been a good thing. And ever really since 2004, so the last 3 years now, 4 years, basically oil prices, our gas prices and diesel prices have been in the $2 to $3 range pretty steadily here. So we're at kind of at the top end of that now, but it's certainly within the historical range for the kind of the post-fracking era.
And once more, diesel is among the many inputs that producers incur over the year, and the urgency is there to manage all costs, and diesel should be among those costs, you say?
Yeah, I would think so. If you look at our crop budget, certainly, they're not anything to write home about, certainly with, kind of minimal profitability there. So I think producers are going to look at anything they can to try to eke out a profit this year, and certainly, managing your expenses is really probably one of the best ways. And, diesel fuel is something you have a little bit of control over by how much you use, and certainly by by making your timing of your purchases, you can maybe control that cost a little bit.
Let's get into that latter point, the seasonality of the diesel fuel market. And it's rather distinctive, you say.
Well, it's not quite as much as gasoline, because if you look at the gasoline market and you look at the seasonality there is a definite trend for having higher gas prices in the summer, mainly because people are traveling more and taking more vacations. But if you look at the last 5 or 6 years and plot out what the monthly fuel price is in relation to what the average yearly price was, you'll see that there is a little bit of seasonality at least. I think there's something there to take advantage of, and you'll notice if you go through and plot those out, we typically find that March and October tend to be the highest prices for diesel fuels, probably about maybe 5 cents higher than the average yearly price, whereas maybe like July and December tend to have some of the lower prices. So if you kind of take advantage of those price swings, on average, you'll probably come out ahead, maybe save yourself 5 or 10 cents a gallon than you would otherwise if you just bought it kind of on an as-needed basis.
So those months, March and October respectively, are linked to anticipation of spring field work as well as fall harvest operations.
Well, for farmers, it works out that way. And it's kind of a bad situation for farmers because if you are buying fuel on an as-needed basis, you're probably having to buy fuel in some of the months that are probably more expensive on a historical basis. So, so buying on an as-needed basis for farmers is probably not the best strategy. You're probably better off buying your fuel a few months earlier.
And defining that, because your same analysis here points out which months tend to be the lowest in diesel prices.
Yeah, usually the wintertime, December, that has historically been the lowest price month, as well as July has been a lower price month too. So, basically you can buy your spring fuel in December as long as you have storage on farm, and then buy your fall fuel in July. That'll probably work out the best for you long run by buying it in those months. And again, there's a lot of variability, so one year may not work out all the time that way. But if you look at over 5 or 6 years, I think those will be the 2 months that do have the lowest fuel prices for diesel fuel.
And as for the other 8 months on the calendar, those prices will range between the highs and lows, basically.
Yeah. Basically, we calculate the average fuel price for the year, and I'm looking at these monthly variations here. So, it can vary quite a bit. But certainly, look at those months that are highest price versus lowest price.
This can be used, this information then, as something of a prediction tool for where diesel prices may be headed for the balance of 2018, then you say.
Yeah, like I said, with the correlation between oil prices and diesel prices is really tight. It's about over a 90% correlation, about 90.93. So, that's almost as good as you can get as far as predicting what the fuel prices are going to be. So if we look at the current price of oil, it would basically say that probably your gas and diesel prices are probably priced accordingly, because when we look at about a $60 oil price or so, I think it's a little bit over that today, that kind of corresponds to like about a $2.50, $2.60 gas price and about a $3 diesel fuel price on a national basis here, and we're kind of right at those areas here. So really, based on what the current oil price is, we're seeing the appropriate price at the pump is what you would expect from that.
And in fact, you take your analysis a little further in the write-up here, saying that it's possible that diesel prices have peaked for the year. You might expand.
Well, there's two things there. So, normally March would tend to be one of our higher price months for diesel fuel. So we're already in March now. So certainly just from the seasonality aspect, you might expect a little bit of a price decrease from now, at least and through July, and then maybe start to see a little bit of an increase starting after July through October or so. So we have that going for us. But we do have a way that we can actually predict oil prices, because we can look at the futures market. Again, traders may not be the best predictors of what oil prices are going to be anyway, but they're putting their money kind of behind what they think is going to happen. So based on what traders think, they're seeing maybe like a little bit of a decrease in our oil price throughout the year and more into the following year. And again, that's kind of pure speculation on their part, but it's probably the best guess we have for what may happen to oil prices.
With a caveat, you also note that the average price for diesel this year may still be above the average for the most recent years. So we're not back to those low ebbs yet.
No, based on what we're seeing for what the futures market tells us for oil prices, I think we could really see a 10-cent decrease in the price of diesel fuel throughout the year. I kind of expect that to be a slow, steady decrease from now, through July, and then maybe kind of holding steady after that. So certainly not a big change, but is, I think, again, a chance to have some lower fuel prices throughout the year. But having said that, again, we're already at a point where we're well above what the fuel price has been the past 2 years. So I still think the average price for 2008 is very much likely to be higher than the average price we saw over the last 2 years. So keep that in mind. Even though I am probably forecasting some decrease, it's still going to be higher than what it has been the last 2 years.
And again, Gregg, how you'd like to see producers utilize these trends and this information in a way to more strategically purchase their diesel and hopefully not live hand to mouth there, so to say.
Yeah, kind of look at those months where fuel's going to be cheaper. If you look at my regression line, I also mentioned there too that basically whenever you see a $10 change in the oil price, that's going to correspond to about a 27-cent price per gallon in the diesel price. So keep that in mind when you see oil prices move. Just think every time you see a $10 move, that's another 27 to 30 cents in the diesel fuel price.
That's a good benchmark to rely upon there. Producers, you might pick up on this publication. It's online at agmanager.info that Gregg just now penned on diesel fuel prices for 2018. It explains these relationships between oil and diesel prices and the seasonality factors that you might consider as you think about advance pricing your fuel at the most pertinent points of the calendar year to your best advantage. Gregg, thank you for coming over.
Thanks.
Gregg Ibendahl, agricultural economist, K-State Research and Extension. The article, once more, at agmanager.info, just put out there. And as a matter of fact, as you're visiting that agmanager.info website, you might take a moment as well to check out the latest Kansas Farm Management Association newsletter. It was just posted a couple of days back. There are some comments on the first page of that newsletter written up by the administrator of the KFMA, Kevin Herbal. And those reflect on the current economic climate that you farmers and ranchers are facing right now, noting the variability and the risk in the agricultural industry, price volatility, trade issues, technology changes, all sorts of forces impacting the decision-making on the farm and ranch. Kevin stresses that one of the keystones to solid farm management during these times, knowing your cost structure. He's urging you producers to not rely on what someone else says it costs to produce your livestock or your crops, whatever your product might be. He says, know your costs and use those costs as you make decisions. And there's loads of information to lean on there on the KFMA website on enterprise analysis. Even if you're not a member of the association, you can tap into that information. But being a member of the association gives you that front row opportunity to work with a KFMA economist to navigate your production costs more effectively. Find out more about the association by clicking the KFMA link you'll find at agmanager.info. You are tuned in to Agriculture Today. Now we'll stand aside for these next few moments here on the K-State Radio Network.
Did you know every Kansas farmer feeds 128 plus people?
Kansas farmers are hard workers, dependable, authentic, and sensitive.
Not only do farmers put food on your table, but they put clothes on your back and fuel in your car.
For more information about Kansas farmers, visit K-State Research and Extension online or stop by your local extension office. This message has been brought to you by the K-State Animal Sciences Leadership Academy participants.
Agriculture Today is back now. Along with us, once again, Charlie Lee. He's a wildlife specialist, K-State Research and Extension. Charlie, we still contend in Kansas, elsewhere likewise, with deer vehicle collisions. It's a serious problem, and there have been some attempts in recent past to come up with a better way of warding deer away from roadways. There's a study associated with this, but the magnitude of the collision problem, what are the latest numbers?
Well, it's certainly a significant issue, not just in Kansas, but other states. In Kansas in 2016, which is the last year that Department of Transportation has posted, there were 10,150 deer vehicle collisions. That number is high, but actually it's been fairly steady right around that 10,000 mark. since about 2005 or 6. But with those collisions, there were also 7 fatalities. That's a significant number of collisions. When you try to break it down, some counties have very few. Some have deer collision rates as high as over 400. But deer collision accidents occurred in every county in Kansas. And we're always looking for ways to reduce those deer collisions, not only for the threats to human safety, but also to the impact on the wildlife populations. When we look at deer damage caused by collisions with vehicles overall, U.S.-wide, it's almost $12 billion a year. That is a significant number, and wildlife vehicle collision mitigation measures, they vary really widely in both cost and effectiveness. Many of you have tried some of the deer whistles or deer repellents or mirrors or model deer in alarm postures. Those techniques have typically proven ineffective at reducing those wildlife vehicle collisions. So we're always looking for additional techniques to improve highway safety.
And one of those approaches, the installation of what are called wildlife warning reflector signs along the roadways. These are around in Kansas as well?
I have not seen these in Kansas. The warning reflectors, called Strider light reflectors or Swarflex reflectors, are very common in Colorado, Wyoming, more of the western United States. They are a mitigation method designed to increase deer vigilance and awareness of vehicles. They're mounted on a series of roadside posts so that the vehicle headlights reflect in a moving pattern across the road and into the roadside vegetation. The intent then is that approaching deer will notice that reflected light and then halt or flee away from the road until the vehicle and the lights then have passed by and would allow the deer to cross safely. Those reflectors are very subtle to drivers, but despite numerous studies, the effectiveness of those reflectors is the subject of a lot of debate. The reports have shown as high as 90% reduction in deer vehicle collisions and as low as 19% reduction. So what was done here was a research effort in Wyoming to evaluate those reflectors and see if they could get a more consistent reflection of the true value of those in improving highway safety.
And you say what they did in this study, in effect, was with those reflectors already in place, they cloaked a few of those to see if there's a difference in deer response.
Yeah, what they did was sections of the roadway that had those reflectors, cover them with white canvas so that they were no longer reflecting light into the roadside, and then measured, counted the number of carcasses, big game carcasses that were found in the roadside. So it was a longer-term study and actually came back with some surprising results.
What did they find then? Are these reflectors showing their wares in this study?
Well, their intent was that the white canvas would negate the effects of the reflectors by physically covering them and preventing the light from being reflected, so that would serve as their control. But to their surprise, they found that it produced very distinct effects on the deer vehicle collision rates and deer road crossing behavior. The reflectors themselves were moderately effective in reducing deer vehicle collision rates, and when you coupled it with the two non-reflective treatments, which was a black canvas as opposed to a white canvas wrapping, the white canvas treatment was consistently more effective than either the reflectors or either of the non-reflective treatments. So it seems to indicate that perhaps there are other things that we can test out there besides reflection of that light into the roadways, that it may have some application in improving vehicle safety in areas where deer crossings are prevalent. I think as we move forward with techniques like this, there's always going to be people that question whether the scientific rigor was sufficient to support adding additional cost to the construction of roadsides. But when we consider those high dollars for collisions and the loss of human life, I think it's imperative that we continue to study and investigate new techniques. There was certainly some discussion of why these are working, and perhaps it could be as simple as now we have something that's new and novel in the environment, that deer are now seeing a white canvas wrap over a post as opposed to the reflected light. But for whatever reason, this particular study showed that just wrapping those posts with white canvas did a significant job of reducing those deer vehicle collisions.
So follow-up may be necessary to see if deer become accustomed to the white canvas, for instance.
There's always problems with most solutions, and oftentimes research leads to additional research. But anytime you can get 33% less carcasses found in a roadside by wrapping posts periodically with a white canvas treatment, that's something that needs to be further investigated.
Well, it is an interesting new evaluation of these wildlife warning reflectors. Charlie, thanks for covering it for us today. Wildlife Specialist, K-State Research and Extension, Charlie Lee. And with that, our time is away for today. Thanks for tuning in. Eric Atkinson here for Agriculture Today over the K-State Radio Network.